How's it going, everybody? This is Rusty here at FCP Aero, and today we're going to show you guys how to replace the front brakes on your Mk8 Golf R. Now in front of me on the table, I do have the front rotors from SHW along with the EBC Blue Stuff NDX. We've gone with this kit because the SHO rotors are the OE manufacturer and the EBC Blue Stuff is a sporty street trackable pad. It's going to still retain a nice cold bite. You're not going to have to heat these up too much to really get the full pedal feel out of them, but it is going to allow you to have some spirited driving along with a little bit of casual driving throughout without having that race bite feel similar found in the EBC red and yellow stuff pads. So this is a good compromise. Although there is no all-weather pad, if you will, this is a good compromise right in the middle. And included in the kit along with the pads and rotors are 2 boots for either caliper as well as all the necessary hardware that we'll be using in this DIY. And you can see here we've already gone ahead and replaced the passenger side rotor. And when you look at these two side by side, they do both look like driver's side rotors. The direction of the drilling as well as the venting on the sides is indicative of a directional rotor. However, the manufacturer, for whatever reason, has decided to go ahead and install them both on the driver's and passenger side. On my left, we do have the rotor from 034, which does have directional venting. This is actually a right-hand side rotor. You can tell based on the direction of the slotting as well as the venting, and these are a true 2-piece unit. So we do offer these as well as the genuine and OE, so keep that in mind when making the choice for your next brake pad job. And some symptoms you may be experiencing, although a low brake pedal or squeaky brakes is most indicative of needing new pads, you could actually have a brake warning message if you've run the brake pads down as far as they can go. The recommended replacement is at about 2 millimeters. However, I like to recommend my brakes when they are no thinner than the actual backing plate material, which is about 5 to 6 millimeters. You tend to get a lot of heat transfer when you start to go below that, so you will start to lose brake pedal feel and increase in noise. Now, in addition to the hardware that we have in the kit, you may see in the description in the kit down below that we did add in the shim clips. These are not necessarily required, however, it will make the job a little bit easier and it will make sure that the pads don't bind or stick. So keep that in mind when purchasing this specific kit. We do offer the factory clips that are not kitted with the EBC brake pads. Now, there is a minimum thickness on the factory rotors, but keep in mind when replacing your brake pads, if they are getting down to the manufactured minimum, you should also consider rotors at the same time. They do tend to wear together and you can create some unwanted noises if you don't replace them both at the same time. Now, vehicle behind us has about 30,000 miles on it. You can see here that the pads weren't typically too worn down, so either they've been replaced once before or the person was not driving it too spiritedly. Generally, these pads can last anywhere from 50 to 60,000 miles, but these look fairly new when comparing them to a new pad. They do still have quite a lot of thickness on them. About 10 millimeters is new and about 2 millimeters is recommended to be replaced. Now, there's not an actual service interval for your brakes per se. It all really depends on driving style. If you're tracking your vehicle or driving it spiritedly, you may get 30 to 40,000 miles out of it. If you're using it as a daily driver or a commuter, you could even see upwards of 100,000 miles out of the front brakes. A lot of the typical ABS systems on these new vehicles do tend to use the rear brakes a lot more than the front. So you wouldn't be surprised if you're doing your rear brakes before actually replacing your fronts. There is one other service interval that I do want to bring to your attention. Volkswagen does recommend replacing the brake fluid on these vehicles after 3 years of ownership and then 2 years after that. As that brake fluid begins to age, it can create a little bit of unwanted pedal feel, maybe squishy, could even create some noise in some instances, but keep in mind if you're doing the brake pad replacement, you may also want to do a brake fluid flush as well. Now that we've gone over everything on the table, let's talk about some of the tools we'll need to take care of the job. Now, as far as tools are concerned, this is a super simple DIY. I may have a little too many things on the table, but this is all going to make this job go a lot easier. So for starters, we're going to need a 21 millimeter socket, a 17 millimeter socket, a 13 millimeter socket, and a T30 Torx bit. I do have a couple of wheel hangers here, a 3/8 wrench, a small screwdriver, a 17 millimeter wrench, and a small hammer. On my right, I do have a caliper hanger, a caliper depressor. I have a 1/4 inch electric ratchet, 1/2 inch impact gun, and a 3/8 impact gun. I also have a drill with a wire wheel on it. In the vehicle's roadside kit, you'll have a little lug cap puller, which will be handy as well, but you can certainly get away with a 90-degree pick. And if you don't have a drill, you can certainly use a wire brush to clean up a lot of the brake debris. A variety of torque wrenches ranging from 8 Newton meters all the way up to 200 Newton meters. And then it will be handy to have a pry bar as well. And now that we have all our tools ready to go, let's get into it. First step in removing our wheel is getting these lug caps off. Located in the trunk, there is a nice little lug cap puller in the roadside kit. It just inserts in there, makes for nice, quick, easy removal of those caps. And then we'll grab the wheel lock, a couple of wheel hangers, and a 17 millimeter and get this wheel off. And now that we got the wheel off, I'm going to go back up into the car and just turn the wheel to the right. If you're working on the left, obviously turn it to the left, but it's going to make it a lot easier to gain access to all the hardware back here, so you're not working in the fender. Now before we go ahead and remove this caliper, I'm going to put a little caliper hanger in the coil spring up here so that once we get that off, we have somewhere to place it so it's not hanging by that caliper hose. I'm going to grab a pry bar and just release the caliper a little bit because these rotors do have a little bit of a lip. So if you have that as well, it may be a little bit difficult once you release these bolts to pull that off. But if you use a pry bar and push the caliper back just enough, it'll make it a lot easier in the long run. So I'm just going to use the tip of the pry bar, get underneath the brake pad, pry it out just enough so that it starts to pull away from the face of the rotor, and then that gives us a little bit of slack and the caliper's starting to loosen up. So these are 13 millimeter bolts, and then there'll be a 17 that you can hold with a wrench or even a pair of pliers. If you're using pliers, just be careful and get on the very outside of that shoulder that kind of has some knurling on the outside. So I'm going to just crack these loose. Now once you have those taken out and you've pushed the caliper back a little bit, should be able to come out quite nicely. We're going to take that caliper hook and just hang it back off to the side. If you have the DCC sensors, be very careful with that. So we're actually going to put it off to the back side of this strut here. I'm going to even put it up a little higher to keep some of that tension off the hose. And once you get the caliper off, you can go ahead and pull the pads out. You may have to wiggle them out. Hopefully yours aren't too seized into place. These don't have a lot of wear on them, but we'll go ahead and set these off to the side. Get both pads out of there, similarly to the outside face of the brake pad out, getting it past these clips. And once we got that out of the way, there is two 21 millimeter bolts on the inside of the steering knuckle. They are rather tight. They're about 200 Newton meters. So you may want something with some leverage if you can't get an impact gun back there. So I'll go ahead and leave this one wheel hanger in there just in case when I release that T30, that rotor doesn't fall off. But you may need to have a hammer present to get this to release. Obviously, our rotor came nice and free, but if that is stuck on there once you release the T30, you will need to strike that rotor with a hammer just to shock it and get it off the hub. And now we can go ahead, clean everything up, put it all back together. So we just want to really grind around the hub surface to make sure that that new rotor is going to have a nice place to seat on here. You also want to take the time to grind around the outside of the hub to make sure that your wheel sits on in a similar fashion. And once you've got the front hub all cleaned up, go ahead and put the wheel hanger back in. Does make it a little bit easier to line everything up with the rotor screw. And we'll go ahead and grab that new rotor screw as well. Just gonna snug this up real quick with the gun just to get it down. And now we're gonna go back and torque that up to 8 Newton meters for the T30. And now that the rotor's all set, we're gonna grab our caliper carrier and get this all rebuilt, cleaned up, and replace the boots and clips. All right, with a little screwdriver, we're gonna get underneath the caliper clips and remove all the shims. You'll notice that they are kind of directional. The spring clamp on the actual clip itself is going to be facing to the outside of the caliper carrier, so if it's helpful at all, you may want to just set them off to the side so that it makes it a little bit easier when reinstalling the new ones. There's a little tab on the front of them you can kind of release with a screwdriver while pulling up on the rest of the clip. Once we get those out of the way, we'll use a little brake cleaner and a rag, try to get most of the brake dust off of here before going after it with a little wire brush. Now, most of what I'm cleaning up here is kind of aesthetic, but it may be the only chance you're going to have to actually clean up this caliper carrier. Mainly, the one thing you want to keep in mind is all the debris that's going to be collecting underneath these clips. If you don't remove a lot of that, these clips may not sit the same way. You could be creating some noise or some ability for the pad to stick in that shim. So it is imperative that you get most of the stuff out of these brackets here. And to get most of that out, you can simply just use a wire brush, stand on the side, and give it a good couple of swipes to make sure we remove any high spots or any stuck on brake dust that could cause anything to not sit correctly. And just like that. Obviously, as these vehicles begin to age, it may not be as easy to remove a lot of that debris. So you may want to use a little something more abrasive, whether it be a file, a wire wheel, or something like that to remove a lot of that caked up debris. But ours came pretty clean, so I'm going to give it one more coat of the brake cleaner, remove any of that extra dust, and then we'll get ready to install the new clips. All right, once you have your clips, there will be 4 specific ones on one side of the carrier and 4 specific ones for the other side. As I mentioned, they do have the clip on the outside. You're not going to be able to insert the pad in here if that clip is on the inside. It's going to make a lot of noise, it's going to drag, and it's going to catch. So let's go ahead and make sure that clip is on the outside and just simply push it onto the outside stand, making sure that it locks in place on the inside. There's a little tab there that'll lock it in, as well as the outside. And just do the same thing on all 4 corners. The nice thing about these little clips is that they are a painted metal, so they're not going to have any corrosion properties, and you're not going to be able, or you're not going to have to use any grease on these. So it's going to keep a lot of that brake dust from sticking in place and causing a lot of stuff to bind up. But should look like that. Clips on the outside and nice new clips all around. Once we got that situated, we can get rid of these and we can go ahead and install some new boots. These may not be entirely necessary. However, if you do develop any cracking or holes in here, as we talked about before, if someone doesn't have a slim 17 to hold the brake caliper pin, you could actually cause some rips in the rubber. So it's nice to have some new boots here. And if there's any holes inside of these boots where water could get in and these start to wear out, you could actually have an instance where the caliper pin sticks and it prematurely wears out your brakes. So it's definitely a good measure to have some new boots on hand. But quite simply, there is a side that will be inserted into the actual caliper carrier, and then a side that the pin will insert into. So the section that has the second center, if you will, is going to be what's going into the caliper pin, and simply just push it on into place. Same thing here, just take the pin out first, and you'll notice there are 2 different pins, one with a rubber little boot on the end, and then one without. So make sure you don't mix those up either. Grab the boot and kind of peel it back, and then we'll swap in the new one. Make sure to spin them around, making sure that they are firmly engaged on the little lip, and we can get rid of those as well. With the new pins here, we're going to clean off any excess grease. Go inside there, make sure that is going to be firmly seated as well. Pull out any extra grease. And then in the kit is some of the brake grease from Ate. So we'll put a little bit of this on there. You don't have to go crazy. A little bit does go a long way. It's not keeping things from rusting. It's literally just keeping things slightly lubricated. And honestly, a little bit too much can actually seize these pins. So spread it throughout, get it on there. A little dab on the end can't hurt. But again, not very much is needed. Make sure that boot kind of gets rolled up the pin, making sure everything moves nice and easily. And we'll do the same thing on the other pin. This is the one with the boot, so make sure you clean it off nice and good. We'll run that in there, see if there's any extra grease in there we can clean out. A little bit did come out. And we'll just go ahead and apply a little bit of grease on the boot and a little bit on the tip. Again, not a lot of grease, just a little bit to keep everything moving freely. Make sure it is all seated in there, run it in a couple of times, make sure everything is good to go. All right, now we've got our caliper carrier reassembled. Go ahead and grab your 2 front caliper bolts and we'll get this thing ready to get back put together. So as you saw, the rotor does like to make its way back to straight. Not really quite sure why, but the steering wheel lock does not want to engage all the way out here. So we'll just reset that back there. We're going to be torquing this 21mm caliper carrier bolt to 200 Newton meters. You are able to reuse this hardware, which is really not typical of Volkswagen, but very nice. There is no angle on it, so we'll go ahead reusing those caliper carrier bolts and torque this one up. There is no difference in the inner or outer of these brake pads. They are all quite simply the same. They all do have a provision for a brake pad wear sensor, as I'm sure they were a pad that was used in another model. However, we don't have any brake pad wear sensors here. So just like we took them out, you're going to tip the inside of the pad towards the rotor to get it around those clips. once you get them past those clips, you're gonna have to push them in a little bit and push them towards the rotor. Same thing on the inside. And the spring clips should allow those brake pads to release from the rotor, which is going to actually be an action that's going to take place once you release your brake pads. Those clips are actually going to help remove that so that it doesn't have any resistance in there. But normally your pins and just the little bit of release would normally take care of that action. So it's nice to see that little bit of release built into the spring clamp. All right, now let's get this caliper back over here. And before we go ahead and push this caliper back in, you did see that we already pushed it back a little bit with the breaker bar. We are going to have to recede these caliper pistons just a little bit more. And one thing we want to keep in mind is that we want to check the fluid level on the brake reservoir. If we start pushing that caliper back, we could raise the brake fluid level, and then we're going to have brake fluid all down the firewall. So I'm going to take a second to go look at the brake fluid level and see where we're at before we push this caliper back. All right, there's definitely a couple of ways to make sure these pistons go back. You could certainly use a pair of channel locks and push them all, both in individually. However, every time you push one in by itself, the other one will raise. So you will have to do a little bit of back and forth. There's a couple of different options for dual piston caliper retraction tools out there. This one is probably going to be our best bet. This is the Lang 279. With this style of caliper, how it has this little beauty plate on there, you're not going to get a traditional pistol grip style caliper depressor in there. So this is going to allow us to go in from the side and work this one up. All right, as you can see, the pistons are now nice and flush. You could certainly take some brake clean in a rag and clean up any brake debris that's on the inside of here. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And once everything's cleaned up to your liking, you've compressed the caliper pistons, we're ready to get this thing back on the car. And in the kit that came with the boots, there is 2 new caliper bolts. Those do have Loctite on them, so they are recommended for a one-time use replacement. You may have to assist the pads against those springs and get everything on there. And just like removal, we do have the 2 13mm bolts here. We'll get these started by hand and grab the 17 to counterhold that. I'm going to quickly run these down with the electric ratchet, and then I'll go back and torque them to 35 Newton meters. All right, and I'd just like to make mention that the exact same repair will be performed on the other side. Torque specs and everything are the same. There is no differences, so we'll go ahead and grab this wheel. And before I do that, I do want to make mention, don't forget to pump up your brakes before exiting the vehicle, but if you're going to be swapping over to the other side and not extracting any brake fluid, pump this side up first before moving over to that one. That way it'll level out the brake fluid. But let's grab that wheel and wrap this up. And with a 17, we will run these lugs back in. And don't forget to torque the wheels to 140 Newton meters, pump the brakes up before exiting the shop, and also follow the bed-in procedure on whatever brake kit you guys decide to go to. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If so, don't forget to hit that like button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, get down in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe because we'll have plenty more videos on this vehicle and many others like it. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.